Aarav Mehta had everything money could buy, but control mattered more to him than love. Priya Sharma believed marriage would rescue her from small life and give her a future filled with freedom and respect. Robert Williams, a quiet elderly retiree, never expected to become part of a secret that would end in bloodshed. 3 lives crossed under one roof, bound by wealth, loneliness, and silence, setting off a chain of events where betrayal turned deadly and trust became the most dangerous illusion of all. The marriage was presented as a perfect match, celebrated with wealth, tradition, and public admiration. The groom was a successful businessman living in North America, known for his expensive properties, luxury cars, and influence within his social circle. He had built a reputation as a self-made man who valued status and control. When he decided to marry, he wanted a partner who would fit neatly into the image he had carefully created. His choice fell on a young Indian woman whose life stood in sharp contrast to his own. The bride came from a modest family where opportunities were limited and dreams often depended on marriage. For her, the proposal promised stability, global exposure, and a future far beyond what she had imagined. The wedding was arranged quickly, driven more by practicality than emotional connection. Relatives on both sides praised the match, seeing it as a victory of fortune and destiny. The ceremony was extravagant, filled with gold jewelry, designer clothing, and endless celebrations that masked the reality that the couple barely knew each other. Behind the grand displays, the relationship lacked a genuine bond. Their conversations were formal, and their expectations were never clearly discussed. The groom viewed the marriage as an extension of his success, while the bride saw it as a doorway to freedom and transformation. Neither truly understood the other's emotional needs. The power imbalance was present from the very beginning, hidden beneath rituals and smiles. As the celebrations ended and the guests departed, the truth slowly surfaced. The bride left her family and homeland almost immediately after the wedding, stepping into a life that felt unfamiliar and overwhelming. The promises of happiness were based on appearances rather than connection. What everyone believed to be a fairy tale beginning was, in reality, the first step toward a deeply fragile union built on assumptions instead of trust. After the wedding celebrations faded, the bride's new life began in a foreign land that felt distant and cold despite its luxury. The house she moved into was large, modern, and filled with expensive furniture, yet it lacked warmth. Every room reminded her that this was not a home built together, but a space she had been placed into. Her husband's routines quickly became clear. He left early, returned late, and often traveled without notice. His absence became normal, leaving her alone for most of the day. She had no job, no close friends, and no familiar faces. Simple tasks like navigating public transport or understanding local customs felt overwhelming. Phone calls to her family were limited and carefully timed, making her feel even more isolated. Over time, the excitement of living abroad faded, replaced by long hours of silence. The days blended together, each one echoing the same emptiness. The marriage itself felt distant. Affection was rare, and emotional support was almost non-existent. Her husband expected gratitude and obedience rather than companionship. He controlled finances, schedules, and decisions, reinforcing the imbalance between them. She learned to stay quiet to avoid conflict, hiding her growing disappointment behind forced smiles. Loneliness slowly transformed into emotional exhaustion. She spent hours online, watching the lives of others move forward while hers remained frozen. The dreams she carried from her old life began to feel unrealistic. The wealth around her only made the emotional poverty more painful. What disturbed her most was the realization that her feelings did not matter. She had traded familiarity and comfort for security, but the cost was her sense of identity. The silence inside the house grew heavier each night, setting the stage for choices she never imagined she would make. Her routine eventually pushed her beyond the walls of the house, searching for distraction and a sense of purpose. Daily walks through the quiet neighborhood became her escape from isolation. It was during these moments that she began noticing an elderly American man who lived nearby. He followed the same schedule, moved at a slow and predictable pace, and seemed disconnected from the rush of modern life. At first, he was simply a familiar presence, someone who made the empty streets feel less lonely. Over time, repeated encounters created a sense of comfort. His calm demeanor and steady routine stood in contrast to the uncertainty she felt at home. The attention he offered felt gentle and non-demanding, something she was no longer used to receiving. Gradually, these moments became part of her daily life, giving structure to days that had previously felt meaningless. The emotional connection developed quietly, without urgency. She found relief in being acknowledged as a person rather than an obligation. The age difference, once unthinkable, seemed irrelevant compared to the emotional understanding she experienced. This connection filled a space that had been left empty by her marriage, giving her a sense of control over her own happiness. As time passed, boundaries blurred. She became more confident, more secretive, and less dependent on her husband's presence. Small changes in her behavior reflected an internal shift. She smiled more during her outings and returned home with a renewed sense of energy that could not be explained. What she did not fully consider was the risk of discovery. She believed the relationship existed in a private bubble, separate from her married life. The illusion of safety made her careless, unaware that her growing emotional independence would soon attract attention and change everything. The changes in her behavior did not go unnoticed for long. Her husband, who was used to control and predictability, began sensing that something was slipping beyond his grasp. She spent more time outside the house, returned later than usual, and showed little interest in explaining her whereabouts. Her phone, once easily accessible, was now guarded carefully. Small details that once meant nothing started to feel suspicious. At first, he dismissed his thoughts, believing his authority was unquestionable. But doubt lingered. Financial statements revealed unfamiliar expenses that could not be tied to household needs. Her sudden confidence and emotional distance challenged his expectations. The imbalance he once relied on was weakening, and that loss unsettled him deeply. His curiosity turned into silent surveillance. Without confrontation, he began observing her routines, tracking patterns, and noting changes in her behavior. The discovery came gradually, each piece of information sharpening his anger. The truth struck harder than he expected, not just because of betrayal, but because of who was involved. The idea that she had formed a connection outside the marriage felt like a public insult to his status and pride. The age and background of the other man intensified his humiliation. It shattered the image he had carefully maintained in his social and professional circles. What hurt him most was not emotional loss, but the sense of control slipping away. Trust dissolved completely, replaced by obsession. Instead of seeking clarity or resolution, he withdrew further into himself. The household became colder, filled with unspoken tension. His thoughts turned darker as resentment replaced reason. The realization that his wealth could not prevent betrayal planted a dangerous idea in his mind, pushing him toward a decision that would permanently alter every life involved. Once the truth settled in his mind, the husband stopped reacting emotionally and began thinking strategically. Anger no longer appeared on the surface, but it continued to burn quietly underneath. He returned to his usual routines, giving the impression that nothing had changed. This calm was not forgiveness, but preparation. Every ordinary moment became part of a larger calculation. He paid close attention to timing and movement, studying the daily flow of the house and the surrounding area. He noted when neighbors were away, when streets were quiet, and when surveillance was weakest. His experience in business had trained him to plan carefully, and he applied the same mindset to something far more dangerous. The goal was not confrontation, but control. He also focused on creating a believable future narrative. He thought about what others would expect, what explanations would sound reasonable, and how delays could work in his favor. He minimized digital traces, reduced communication, and avoided actions that could raise suspicion. His behavior appeared disciplined and calm, masking the violent intent forming beneath the surface. The decision he made was final and irreversible. It was not driven by sudden rage, but by wounded pride and fear of exposure. He convinced himself that removing the problem would restore order and protect his image. In his mind, the act became justified, even necessary. When the moment arrived, it unfolded quickly. There was no hesitation, only execution of a plan refined over weeks. The luxury home that symbolized success became a place of destruction. Immediately afterward, he focused on erasing signs of what had happened, believing that intelligence and wealth would shield him from consequences. What he failed to understand was that control can collapse faster than it is built, especially when driven by arrogance and silence. The disappearance did not create immediate panic, which was exactly what he expected. He presented a calm explanation, suggesting she had chosen to leave on her own to clear her mind. In the early days, the story seemed believable. She had been distant, and her absence appeared to fit the narrative he carefully prepared. However, as time passed, small inconsistencies began to surface. Her phone remained inactive, and no financial activity appeared on her accounts. Personal belongings were left behind, including items she never traveled without. People who knew her routine noticed the sudden break in patterns. Messages went unanswered, and scheduled commitments were quietly missed. The silence surrounding her absence grew louder with each passing day. Concern reached her family in India, who struggled to understand how she could vanish without notice. Their repeated attempts to reach her failed, prompting them to contact authorities abroad. What began as a welfare check quickly turned into a missing person investigation. Officials requested detailed timelines, travel records, and communication logs. Under closer scrutiny, the husband's statements began to unravel. His calm demeanor raised questions rather than reassurance. Surveillance footage from nearby areas revealed movements that contradicted his version of events. Neighbors recalled unusual activity during hours he claimed to be away. Each new detail weakened the story he had constructed. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered digital traces that pointed toward hidden aspects of her life. The name of an elderly retiree surfaced during the inquiry, adding an unexpected and shocking layer to the case. What was once seen as a voluntary disappearance now carried signs of deliberate deception, drawing attention toward a far more serious possibility. The investigation intensified as evidence continued to surface, shifting the case from a disappearance to a suspected homicide. Forensic analysis revealed traces inside the house that could not be explained by normal activity. Cleaning patterns appeared deliberate rather than routine, suggesting an attempt to remove something specific. These findings directly challenged the husband's earlier claims and raised serious concerns among investigators. Digital records became a crucial turning point. Location data placed him in areas he insisted he had never visited during critical time periods. Internet searches revealed troubling patterns, including topics related to disappearance and legal consequences. Financial transactions showed unusual behavior immediately after the incident, signaling panic rather than planning for travel or separation. The secret relationship was confirmed through recovered messages and surveillance footage from nearby locations. The elderly retiree was questioned extensively, and while his involvement explained the motive, evidence showed he had no connection to the violent act itself. His cooperation helped establish a clearer timeline, further isolating the husband as the central figure in the crime. As pressure increased, the husband's composure began to fracture. His earlier confidence gave way to inconsistencies and unexplained gaps in his narrative. Investigators compared statements over time, identifying contradictions that could not be dismissed as memory errors. The story he had crafted collapsed under the weight of verified facts. Piece by piece, the truth emerged. The image of a controlled, successful man was replaced by evidence of obsession and fear. What he believed was a flawless plan unraveled quickly, proving that power and intelligence offer no protection when reality is preserved through evidence. The case was now firmly grounded in fact, leaving little room for denial. The final outcome of the case left behind a silence that felt heavier than the crime itself. Once the legal process concluded, the story faded from headlines, but the damage remained permanent. The husband, once respected and admired, was now defined by his actions. His wealth, properties, and social standing lost all meaning inside prison walls. The life he worked so hard to protect was gone, destroyed by his own choices. The bride became more than a victim in official records. Her story forced many to confront uncomfortable realities about isolation, power imbalance, and emotional neglect within marriages built on convenience rather than understanding. People who once admired the wedding began questioning how warning signs were ignored so easily. Her life, reduced to headlines at first, slowly became a symbol of what happens when loneliness is silenced. The elderly retiree returned to a quiet life marked by guilt and public judgment, even without legal blame. His involvement, though emotional rather than violent, changed him permanently. The attention he once offered now felt like a burden he would carry for the rest of his life. Families on both sides struggled to rebuild. Grief crossed borders, cultures, and generations. There was no closure, only acceptance of a reality that could never be undone. Rituals, prayers, and legal outcomes failed to replace what was lost. In the end, the case stood as a warning rather than a mystery. It showed how control can turn into obsession, how silence can become dangerous, and how unchecked pride can destroy everything it touches. The tragedy did not belong to one person alone. It belonged to everyone involved. What remained was a lesson written in loss, reminding the world that emotional cruelty can be just as deadly as violence.